The Crescent Moon Club, in association with ABT, presents Omnibus Unlimited, a roundtable discussion of provocative subjects which must be addressed today. A new philosophy for the third millennium. Hello again, everyone. I'm Laurence Nobile, independent researcher and host of Omnibus Unlimited. Tonight, from our ABT studios in Dover, our topic for discussion is The Day the Earth Stood Still. With us to address this subject is psychic healer and medical technician Tom Murray. Tom, thanks for being here this evening.
Good evening, Larry. Good evening, everybody out there listening, and good evening to the rest of the crew here.
Communications expert Kevin Smith. Kevin, thank you for being here tonight.
A pleasure to be here, Larry.
Weathercaster Damon Nobile. Damon, thanks for being here tonight and for preparing our accommodations here at our ABT studios in Dover.
Oh, I'm very excited to be here, especially for this show.
And, of course, seeker and producer of Omnibus Unlimited, John Horrigan. John, thanks for being here tonight and having the show.
My pleasure, Larry.
Our visual backdrop for tonight's show is provided by ABT. Gentlemen, the day the Earth stood still, it's a little difficult to imagine the Earth not spinning on its axis, not experiencing its little wobble that it has. I forget the exact term that is used for that. Or it's hard to imagine the Earth not spinning around the sun. What would conditions be like, both gravity-wise and weather-wise? What would conditions be like on this planet if the Earth stood still? Tom, you want to kick this off?
Well, we have a weather expert with us tonight, as you mentioned earlier, your brother here, who I've learned to watch what he says. I think not only does he have a academic sense of the weather, in which you can use your various instruments and historical facts and so forth, but he also has that inner sense or touch or feel for the weather, in which he can sense a shift in the air, a temperature drop, things like that. He doesn't need the thermometer to tell him things of that nature. And he tunes into what's going on with the wind and temperature and things of that nature, and what's going on with the animals and the rate of tree growth and so forth. So, Damon?
You, of course, are referring to weathercaster Damon Nobile. And Damon, I put the question to you, if the Earth should stop rotating, what would weather conditions be like on this planet?
Well, a lot of the weather is based on the spin, the rotation of the Earth. You take away the spin of the Earth, then you're taking away what is called vorticity. You're taking away spin in the atmosphere. What you're looking at is probably just areas of clouds and areas of possible sunshine. It all depends. Now, let's say, all right, the Pacific Ocean is so intensely big. Now, let's say the sun winds up being on the Pacific Ocean at all times, and the other side of the world where we are, it's awful cold. We're going to have a very different weather than if we were in the sun, a lot more continents in the sun, and less water in the sun. Big difference. You'd have a much warmer climate if there is more continents with the sun rays hitting them.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you have more ocean, you're going to have colder temperatures. I'm telling you, I wouldn't want to be around here if the Earth stopped spinning.
Right. Now, does the Earth spin faster than the atmosphere, or does the atmosphere spin faster than the Earth? The atmosphere and the Earth go at varying rates. Is that correct?
Well, the atmosphere is thinner as you go farther and farther away from the Earth. So there is friction. But to say the Earth itself, the atmosphere is so thin, you really can't estimate if the atmosphere is going any faster or any slower than the Earth's spin itself. When you look at the Earth and you look at the atmosphere, it's very small difference. It's almost part of the Earth.
Yes, Tom.
Yes, Damon. Well, I think, Larry, what you might be sort of saying is, for instance, when I'm standing here right now, I'm held to the Earth by gravity, so as the Earth spins, I'm going at that speed. Now, if I walked forward, I'm going at the rate of the Earth plus my speed. My velocity is greater. This is why people get hurt in automobile accidents. So, like the atmosphere is held to the Earth by the gravitational force, the attraction between the molecules of air and the Earth. So, if the Earth was not moving, there would be some idea in which there's the momentum of the air in its normal currents going with and against the rotation of the Earth and going north and south in their eddies. All of a sudden, if the Earth's not moving, those currents, because of their own momentum, would continue to move. And as you mentioned, there's friction between the different layers of the Earth. And whenever you have friction, you have heat, you have energy, and because you have different temperatures at different heights, you also would have more motion.
Well, there are also air brakes, right? No.
Okay, what do you mean by air brakes, Damon?
No, that was a little humor right there. But actually, you know, the atmosphere would probably start to expand a bit. It would probably start to expand a bit, but I believe the gravity would still be here. The gravity would still be here. Air weighs a certain amount, so the gravity would hold the air to the Earth. But in another sense, I believe the atmosphere would actually start to expand on the Earth.
Well, that's interesting what you say, Damon, and perhaps that is the case. But now, let's consider for a moment, if the Earth were to stop spinning, let's consider, well, if it's just gradually slowed down, well, that's one matter, to zero. But if it were just to stop spinning, the Earth spins at about 260,000 miles an hour or something along those. John?
Yeah, I just want to, in line with that, I want to ask the panel then, is our Earth spinning faster than it did, say, 500 years ago, 1,000, 100,000, 10 million years ago, or is it spinning slower? Tom?
I feel the Earth is spinning slower than it was 8,000 years ago, and perhaps minimally slower than it was 2,000 years ago. However, if you go back to the ancient Columbian records in Colombia, in Peru, and so forth, the days of recorded time, or the length of days and the number of days in a year, their calendars up to a certain date record, I think it's 360 days of the year. Shortly after that, they had to make a time check or time correction in their astrological calendars, which were more accurate than the ones that we had in the 18th century. And probably 4,000 years ago, they added 5 days to their calendar, 365 days of the year. And in fact, they had the days shaded a little bit so that their calendar still was more accurate than ours with adding leap year. So the people of the temple-building countries in which they built these pyramid-type temples, the Aztecs, Indians, and Peruvians, had a calendar originally of 360 days and eventually moved it up to 365. So within about 4,000 years, we've picked up about 5 days over a 2,000-year period, which to me would indicate that the velocity or rate of the Earth's rotation around itself is gradually slowing down.
Well, it's very interesting, and prior to that, there was actually a calendar that only had 10 months, and January and February were added to it. And in fact, at one point, April 1st was the beginning of the new year, and that's why they still to this day call it April Fool's Day.
Well, yes, of course, you have to think of the fact that during the Roman era, the Romans liked to, once they were emperor, declare themselves gods when they came close to their time of death, what they felt they would be passing away. And there were certain criteria they had to do to fulfill this. So sometimes they would create a month in order to have their name put up there for memoriam. July is an example of that. July is named after Julius Caesar. So the reason we have 12 months today is not so much astrological correction. It's more for ego fulfillment of certain people that like to be called emperor. And as I say, July was named after Julius Caesar, so at that time you had 11 months. And I think October is named after the Emperor Octavius, also from the Caesarian family, and Augustus the month of August. Some months simply changed their name and other months were added in. But basically, you could very easily go right back to a 10-month calendar and have about, I think it's 28 days a month or something like that, and the calendar would work very well. But again, as I stated a moment ago, you've had to add 5 years to our calendar. And today, what's the length of a day today? It's 24 hours...
1 minute and 30-something seconds.
1 minute and 30-something seconds. So why is it longer? 2,000 years from now, would another 5 days have to be added to our calendar year? And that means that it's going 10 days slower than it was 4,000 or 5,000 years ago. So as it continues to slow down, when does it stop spinning?
Larry,
Yes, Kevin.
To back to one of your questions, you suggested that what would the Earth be like if it were to suddenly stop rotating?
Would we continue going at 280,000 miles an hour? Or?
Yes, the laws of physics would dictate that if you were on a moving train, moving at that speed, and the train stopped, that you would continue going into the nearest stationary object.
At that speed.
At that speed. But think about what you're saying here. A mass the size of the Earth suddenly stop spinning. It would take a huge, highly placed trajectory to slow it down.
Something would have to smash into us.
But if it wasn't perfectly placed, it would just set it off on a different wobble.
Kevin, what about the atmosphere? If the Earth stops immediately, the atmosphere would level everything because the atmosphere has weight. It would level everything. We wouldn't have to worry.
Oh, I understand what you're saying. Yes. Physics dictates that if the mass of the Earth would to stop, all of the other mass would continue moving, and like I said, until it reached the nearest immovable object. But what you're suggesting is almost unthinkable.
Okay.
It really seems as close to impossible as impossible can get.
It was a naive question, but it was worth asking at least a little bit. Yes, Tom?
You know, Larry, I really don't think it's a naive question because I think we have historical precedents for this incident. We have things that we call the Ice Ages. What are the Ice Ages? Where do the Ice Ages come from? Why do we call them the Ice Ages? How did they become the Ice Ages? Why did the North Pole and the South Pole become covered with ice, whereas thousands and thousands of years ago they were tropical? They had tropical plants, tropical trees, tropical animals. Scientists digging into the ice in Antarctica and the Arctic seas have come up with seed plantlings that, when they've been put in the ground, have been perfectly frozen for thousands of years and bloomed into plants. Why is most areas that today are desert, when you dig into the sand, you find life of crustaceans that are seaborne? In other words, the oceans of the earth used to be deserts. The deserts of the earth used to be oceans. The warm climates used to be cold climates, and the cold climates used to be warm climates. This could only happen instantaneously if somebody were to freeze dry a can of coffee like we do today, except make that can of coffee the size of the earth. I believe that the frozen man that we found recently in the snow, that the frozen mastodons that we find up in the Antarctic and so forth, were frozen instantaneously because the earth stopped its spin. That the Earth, I'm not sure how frequently, perhaps every 100,000 years or so, loses its ability to keep spinning at a sufficient rate of speed in which it basically, within a couple of days, stops. Its tremors, earthquakes, because land masses are moving around, go through the whole Earth. And just like if you walk fast and you trip with a cup of coffee or a liquid, the liquid continues to propel forward even as you go downward. At the land masses along the edges of land, coastlines, will be inundated with 10-story tall waves of water that will wash over and wipe out the sea coasts. On the opposite end, You will also have a backlash, whereas that wave recedes and goes back in the other direction, you'll have waves in the other direction. When we have floods at sea, when we have tidal waves at sea, we usually have a series of waves, one wave followed by several other waves. And on other sides, on continents of other side of the Earth, there's also increased wave action there also. We have to remember that on the Earth plane, in three-dimensional physics, for every action there is an opposite and equal reaction. I think there will be tremendous storms, much like storms and hurricanes that you see on planet Mars. They talk about the wild winds of Mars. That's what we're going to have on the Earth. As the planet stops its spin, it will start to wobble, just like a top wobbles when it slows down. As it starts to tilt, the North Pole and the South Pole will start moving more towards what we call the equator, and the equatorial countries will start to move more towards the North and the South Pole. I believe that the Earth is probably 12 or 13 degrees out of its original balance for its last correction. It is written by Reverend John Churchward and by other people who have studied phenomena of the continents such as Lemuria, Atlantis, and other ancient civilizations, and who have studied the ancient Nakal texts and the writings of Hindu and Buddhist writers and historians, and have studied the ancient Egyptian texts about natural phenomena and about destructions of continents and oceans, that there was about a 22-degree tilt in the last major ice age. This tilt would probably be less. There'd be less land destruction. I believe that cities and states such as Florida, the city of New York, especially the island of Manhattan, the state of California will be inundated. They'll just be ripped right off the earth and flooded under. I believe the city of Boston, you won't find it. I believe this will also happen in places like England, Ireland, the east coast of Europe, the coastlines of France and England. Major areas will be overflooded and destroyed. Trees, telephone lines, high-tension lines, all kinds of electrical and hydroelectric energy will be snapped in two like a twig in the wind. And so a lot of our power sources, communication sources will be knocked out. Perhaps low-built mountain microwave stations that are located on mountaintops or in valleys between hills will be able to survive. These will be the only means of communication through satellites. Yet because of the heavy pollution, because of the heavy steam created by our boiling oceans and melting ice cap packs, because the boiling oceans that are in cool climates will be brought towards the sun, and the polar ice caps will be brought towards the sun, you'll have tremendous heat. And as Larry mentioned, you'll have a lot of friction in the air. So you'll have hot and cold spinning around. You'll have hurricane-type weather all around the world. And so the satellite communications will be interrupted, because we won't be able to beam our microwaves and our radio waves off our satellites and back to the Earth. So that even that communication setup, the SDI-type communication setup, will be interrupted. Man basically will be on his own. Your electricity will fail. There'll be shortages of gasoline and other fuels. Medical supplies will be wiped out, as will be hospitals and shelters. This is what I believe will happen when the Earth stops spinning. Life as we know it will come to a standstill.
Very interesting. And if you've just joined us, the name of this program is Omnibus Unlimited. Radiovision for the 21st century, and infotainment in its purest essence. Tonight, our roundtable is discussing the day the Earth stood still, and we're theorizing what life will be like on this planet if and when the Earth stops spinning. We have had indications whereby the Earth is slowing down its spin, and this would seem to be about the case, wouldn't it, Kevin, that like a top, there are forces pulling and tugging. We have the moon pulling on the Earth. We have all of the varying planets, and even the galaxy itself has a tug on the Earth. So with all these tugs, even though that the Earth is floating around in empty space, and I say that quote-unquote empty space.
Frictionless empty space.
That there is some physics working against the Earth to slow it down. Would you agree with that? Or?
Yes, the initial energy which put it into its orbit with its spin has been having a dimension of law of diminishing returns, where little by little it's the spin is slowing down, the actual rotation around the sun is slowing down. But I really don't foresee in the immediate future that it will immediately come to a halt.
Certainly not within our lifetime.
And as Damon pointed,
That's so convenient to say that. Just never in our lifetime. And I'll get back to when I graduated from high school in 1979. The universe and the Earth and everything was 4 billion years old. Today it's 250 billion years old. Now I argue that I've aged 246 billion years in 13, and I look pretty damn good, and I think we all do since 79. But no, you can't say that. You can't quantify it as such, Larry.
Yes, John, and also there was general agreement that World War II wouldn't happen in anybody's lifetime, too. And gee, that came along.
Damon, you wanted to add something.
I wanted to ask Kevin. I want to ask Kevin about Mercury. Mercury does not spin.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, here at Omnibus Unlimited, we're all very well acquainted with each other.
Thank you, Kevin. I mean Larry.
And we love to eat when we talk.
Yes, Kevin. Mercury does not spin.
correct.
And would you say Mercury used to spin? Or would you say Mercury is about to spin?
Well, I don't think it's about to spin. I can't tell you whether it used to spin, but from its orbit and pattern, it hasn't spun for quite a while.
Well, it is round. All of our shapes, all these spheroids, all right, used to spin at one time.
Okay,
I mean, the
Aristotle.
Earth, when the Earth tore from a sun,
talking
it
like
was
Ptolemy.
molten and it was a block. It wasn't round. The spin of the Earth caused the spheroid shape.
Wrong, Archimedes. It did not cause that. Now, we don't know how these spheres came to be. Were they? Are they spawned from the sun, or were they matter that was, or debris floating in space that was pulled in by our sun?
Damon, if you take a drop of mercury and you drop it on a table, what shape does it generally take? Generally, it's a circle of some kind. If you take molten metal and float it in space...
That's gravity.
That's right. Gravity pulls itself to itself until all the pressures are equal. That's why the planets are circular. Not because they spun dry themselves. They pulled from the middle until all the pressure was equal on all the surfaces. If you take mercury, a metal which is liquid at this temperature, and you float it in space, it will form a sphere because it wants to equalize the gravitational forces on all of its surfaces.
Good idea.
I don't know if it'd be gravitational forces in that sense, because you're not talking about gravity there. What you're talking about is the attractive forces of the molecules itself. And therefore, if you were in space and they floated in the air, it could take any shape.
Absolutely.
We've noticed that with astronauts in space.
Very interesting. So, I guess what we should really kind of concentrate on is that life would be strikingly different than we understand it today. Is that the general consensus?
Should the Earth stand still? Damon thought that the atmosphere would actually get larger. I thought you say
Larger.
I think without the benefit of the centrifugal force,
Right.
the effect might be just the opposite, where you would not have a force pulling on the upper atmosphere. The gravitational force would kind of shrink the outer atmosphere.
Very
and
interesting.
the effect may also be felt here on the surface. A pound may weigh a little more than a pound.
Tom?
Well, I think, again, it's more of interpretation. Damon, would you say that, say, the amount of, or density of the air right on the Earth at the moment would be less, because you still have the attractive pull of the sun. So a lot of the air masses would shift back towards the sun, or towards the side that's facing the sun, gravity and Earth playing between them, and also that because you'd have these big storms,
Well,
that there's more activity in the air, so some of that will go to the higher levels and then circulate. Over time, as you said, it'll come back to the same balance, but initially it would tend to be more active throughout.
the atmosphere would actually be oblong shape. The atmosphere against the dark side of the Earth would actually be a lot thinner, would be a lot narrower, closer to the ground than the atmosphere on the bright side of the Earth, which would be a lot more altitude to it because it would be a lot warmer.
I disagree. I don't think it would be to that extreme where you would use the word a lot. Newtonian physics, Newtonian gravity, the gravity is equal to the mass divided by the distance. The Earth is a good sum of distance away from the sun. So the difference between one side of the Earth and the other would be minimal.
Distance from the sun has nothing to do with it. What it has to
It
do
has
with
everything to do with it. That would be the root source of gravity that you were talking about.
What makes
you have
the
the
winter-
gravity of the Earth, which is closest to the atmosphere, should make the largest amount of impact on the atmosphere around the Earth, and then you have the gravity of the sun, which is much larger in mass, but so far away that its effect is minimized.
We are closer to the sun in our winter and farther away from the sun in our summer. It's the angle of the sun that makes all the difference.
Yes,
Now,
but does our atmosphere expand and contract during the seasons?
Yes, it does. Very
It's
much
thinner
so.
at the
As a matter
poles
of
than it
fact,
is at the equator.
closer to the poles, the atmosphere is denser and closer to the ground than the atmosphere is at the poles. The poles, the atmosphere is much higher up in the higher up.
I wish you wouldn't be such a racist talking about the polars like that.
Okay, I won't. But now, when you cool the atmosphere, what happens is it gets denser, and there's actually more weight to it. Colder,
close to the Earth,
colder
right.
air is more dense, comes closer to the Earth. So you would actually have an
Well, you're
oblong
contradicting
shape.
yourself. A few minutes ago, you said the dark side would be a thinner atmosphere.
Thinner, thicker. It would be a thinner. It wouldn't be as thick. All right, the height of it. You would leave the atmosphere sooner than if you were on the sunnier side of the Earth.
So the atmosphere would be more compressed.
More compressed and more dense.
Okay. Very interesting. Tom, why don't you wrap this up? We've only got about 4 minutes left. Any final thoughts?
Final thoughts.
Very quickly. We've got about 1 minute.
Basically, what I feel is that the Earth has been going through a lot of changes. We're coming to the end of an epoch, end of an era, and end of a 26,000-year cycle. If you know your ancient histories, if you know how calendars are constructed before we started doing it with pencil and pen and printing press, is it takes the sun 26,000 years to move around its pattern in the solar system. And during that 26,000 cycle, they are broken up into 12,000-year cycles in which we have histories on the Earth which are affected by sunspots, affected by lineup and gravitational forces of the planets, and affected by cosmic consciousness and psychic experience of the human race. During this period of time, you've had civilizations grow up and disappear. Lemuria and Atlantis are examples of them. Lemuria sank about 12,000 years ago when there was a shift in the polar ice caps and electromagnetic fields of the Earth. The North Pole was different. Chinese writing and several writings from other countries such as South America, Africa, and Central Asia write about the sun rising in the north and setting in the south, that there's been at least 4 times in a time of recorded and pre-recorded history leading up to 100,000 years ago in which the poles have shifted. And with each time there have been tremendous climatic changes. I believe that prior to the year 2000, this will happen again.
Very interesting. And that will have to end our discussion of the day the Earth stood still. I'd like to thank our guest for appearing on tonight's show, psychic healer and medical technician Tom Murray. Tom, thanks for being here this evening.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you, gentlemen.
Communications expert Kevin Smith. Kevin, thanks for being here this evening.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Damon. A wonderful discussion.
Weathercaster Damon Nobile. Damon, thanks for being here this evening.
It was a pleasure, and I hope to see everyone again next week.
And, of course, seeker and producer of Omnibus Unlimited, John Horrigan. John, thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you, guys.
If you have any questions, comments, suggestions, or if you'd like to be a guest on Omnibus Unlimited, the address to write to is Omnibus Unlimited, Box 577, Dover, Massachusetts, 02030-0577. And all letters will be answered on upcoming episodes of Omnibus Unlimited. I'm Laurence Nobile, independent researcher and host of Omnibus Unlimited. For all of us here at Omnibus Unlimited, thank you for your attention, good night, and good luck. Omnibus Unlimited is a presentation of ABT and the Crescent Moon Club. This program is presented by authority of ABT. Any broadcast, rebroadcast, or other use of the accounts and descriptions of this copyrighted telecast without the expressed written consent of ABT is strictly encouraged. Copyright 1993 by ABT.
The Day the Earth Stood Still, the title of a movie done in the late 1950s. Is it going to come through? Will the Earth stop in its orbit? This and other issues are discussed on the Crescent Moon Club. Tune in and find out what we think will happen in about the year 2000, when the Earth stops its rotation and chaos reigns. It's an ABT production of the Crescent Moon Club, The Day the Earth Stood Still.